This is Future Sense Now, where we explore the landscape and byways of our shared futures. Future Sense Now is brought to you by the Futures Forum. Stay tuned for a journey to the futures of women with host Dr. Claire Nelson.
Greetings and welcome to Future Sense Now, an online e-zine of the Futures Forum. I am Claire Nelson and your travel guide on today's exploration to the future. It is March 2017 and we're celebrating Women's History Month with an exploration into the future history of women. That's right, the future history of women, and specifically the near history. We're looking at the years 2030 and beyond. Why 2030? Because this is a poll year as 169 nations of the world have come together to endorse UN Sustainable Development Goals, and SDG 5 is all about women and girls. Basically, it says to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And the targets vary from the most basic, like end all the forms of discrimination, to things like undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources, enable use of enabling technology, adjust and strengthen sound policies, and so on and so on. Well, today, our guest on the show is ALISHA Bhagat. Now, let me tell you, ALISHA, my name is Alicia, so I sort of have a fond already affection for my newfound friend. She is a senior sustainability futurist? No, senior sustainability advisor. Well, she is a futurist at the Forum for the Future. So let me get it again. So today's guest is ALISHA Bhagat, and she's a senior sustainability advisor for Forum for the Future office based in New York. And I am entirely excited to have her join me, as I think she's probably the youngest person on this series. So this is really great. So welcome, ALISHA. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Now, I notice you're wearing a shirt, "The Future is Female." This meme has been around for some time, but has picked up steam in the last, I would say, 40 days and 40 nights with the upsurge or upswing of the women who came out to march in January around the world, I would say. Mm-hmm. Now, it's appropriate you're wearing that shirt because, indeed, the question has been, in talking to some of my guests, is the future really female? Is it something else? And if that's the case, what does the UN Sustainable Development Goal around 2030 and equality mean to you as somebody who's working on futures issues, working with companies, working with governments to create the future? How do you see that future is female playing out?
I think the future is female kind of coming out of the post-election fervor and the progressive movements that have come out of that. I think that it's kind of an empowerment slogan. So people see it as a rallying cry to get people excited, especially excited about kind of what the future holds. That it's saying that, we as women have that potential to shape the future and create the future that we want to see. So women as voters and so on. So I think to me, that's what the slogan kind of means, is that, women do have power, and we need to find more opportunities for women to have power, both, economic, political, social, and so on. And that's going to be increasingly important.
Now, one of the questions I have on that note of power, though, because in the past, women having power has not really meant anything different for society. Women have had power, let's say, President of Brazil, the Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, India. I mean, does the future's female and women having power mean more of the same, or is it going to be a different future in some way?
So I think there's two issues there. One is about representation. So those are kind of specific examples of individuals, and I think it's less about the individual person and more about the larger representation. So yes, there are those individual women, you can point to specific women who have had power in the U.S. government, but, I think the Congress and Senate are over 80%. So overall, while there are these individual cases, the larger kind of the long-term trends that we look at as futurists are still that men do hold the majority of the power. And I think it's less about saying, is there a woman doing this specific job, and more that are women's voices being heard in those forums? So, you know, if a woman isn't holding office, that isn't necessarily terrible. It's looking at, one, are women being represented by the people who are elected officials, but then also, are our elected officials representing the views of women and getting those needs across through the policies that they make?
So that's a good question, because the views of women, I mean, one of the questions I have as we look at these goals, for example, equal rights to economic resources. Let's take that one, or natural resources. Um, are we saying then, when we say the future is female, that women having power will bring a different perspective on economic resource use or natural resource use and the laws and the rules thereof? Or is the future is female is simply saying we're going to be able to, sit at the table? How far do you think this slogan means, especially for people in your age group? I mean, what does that mean to you to say the future is female beyond say, okay, we're at a seat at the table, but the table is still square, and the table was designed by a man in the first place? How does that make it any different in terms of the outcome for more women?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying. If the table is the exact same table and you're just slotting women into seats, then it doesn't really make that much change. I mean, it makes change for those individuals, but not in the larger system. I think looking at it in terms of, there is this one half of the population whose power and intelligence we have not fully realized yet. So we haven't fully integrated those members of society into society. And it's not just women. You can say this about racial minorities and other groups that are not fully integrated into society yet in terms of equality, economic, political, social. People are excluded, our society is weaker for it. So the way that we approach problems such as, resource sharing or ecological management, climate change, those are going to be less effective because we're just excluding this large percentage of the talent pool that could have something to add, just kind of in that manner.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed that they say senior sustainability advisor, and every time I see the word senior, I was like, so what does a junior one look like? That must be a 15-year-old. But I'm an engineer, and I call myself a sustainability engineer because I studied industrial engineering, and because back in the day when I was doing my dissertation, I focused on systems approach. And back then, there was not, like, when I was doing my dissertation, it was not the norm to have an environmental impact assessment and a social impact assessment. And I actually was posing those things as the new way to look at how, industry should function. So as we look at them women, I guess I was looking at it from the point of view of, okay, we need a whole system. So the future is female. In your work as a sustainability advisor, and we look at the SDG around undertaking reforms for economic resources, access to ownership, access to inheritance, natural resources, and ICT,
Mhm.
especially given the move towards more and more technology and ICT and AI. How do you think we might arrive at this more equitable, I won't say equal, but let's say more equitable use and access and opportunity in 2030? What are some drivers you think that might take us there?
Towards a more equitable future is what
Well,
you're saying.
equitable use of ICT, equitable use of resources, economic resources. What are some drivers you think that could actually make us achieve that goal?
Well, I think that there is one trend that we look at Forum that's in our work. that we call kind of hyper-connected world, in that the advances in ICT have made it so that it's really easy to kind of be connected and be plugged in. And there's this rise of, social media networking. And what that's meant is that when people do have views or, changes that they'd like to make in society, those voices become amplified. And you don't necessarily have to be a person from established place of power. You can start a grassroots movement, and you can push for, something like anti-corruption in India. You can push for clean air in China. And citizens can act and harness technology to get those voices heard and make those changes kind of outside of the traditional structures that they were using. So I find that kind of one of the ways that I see change happening is citizen innovation, using ICT especially to kind of amplify voices and draw a spotlight to key issues.
Yeah, but some people think that what we're seeing now, in terms of Brexit, President Trump winning, the rise of the ultra right in Europe, for example, even though it's headed by a woman, that there's a sort of a backlash, uppity women and women's equality and the idea of equity and sharing, is now going to be pushed into the corner. And I am wondering if you think there's any possibility at all of there being sort of a clampdown on freedom of this technology. In the way China, for example, blocks certain information, do you think it could ever happen in the US and Canada that, for example, they could have the same effect by making things that are now free no longer free? You think that that could ever be the case? Or you think there's no way, you just can't see it ever happening in the US, where information, access to the internet, our lifeblood will now be taken away?
I think that there's, very few things that everyone agrees on, but I don't want to say never, because anything can happen. But I think there's very few things that I would say young people agree on, and I think that probably access to the internet is a major one of them. So I think that most people in the U.S. and Canada would want free speech, and that they would want access to online ICT communication as a kind of almost as a human right. So I think people see that as really, really important. If you look at hours that people spend on the internet and the amount of time they spend on their devices, it is definitely very important and integrated in people's lives. So it would have to be a drastic change to get that out. I was just reading an article about people in their 20s doing digital detox for a weekend, and how troubling it was. They really struggled with it.
Wow, that's fascinating. So this addictive idea of being always connected. I mean, I've had friends who have accused me, like, I couldn't get you. I'm like, it was only one day. Yeah, but you're supposed to be always on. I'm like, actually, that was a Sunday. I could take a day of rest. So I do hear what you're saying. And you've done some work in Myanmar, and I'm wondering how different this time, how different you think this time and opportunity is right now, in terms of what, let's say, young women are facing on this side of the world versus Myanmar, which probably you can explain more in terms of its culture, politics. It's a young society. How do you think young women are feeling now about this issue about access to information and therefore access to growing their power?
I think, just only based on my work, I'm not quoting any other studies, that young people are really excited there. They're excited that they are essentially jumping from landlines to smartphones. There's no in between, and that they now have access to all of these things. And I think that their hope, with young women especially, is that it will open up economic opportunities for them, that their ability and the ability of young people to learn technology so quickly will afford them more economic opportunities than just kind of a sort of a manual labor type of situation. So kind of young people don't want to work in agriculture. They don't want to, you know, forestry. They want to work in ICT fields, and they want to do startups and entrepreneurship. So the hope is that, you know, access to this technology will enable those sorts of career paths for both men and women, and definitely women, young women in Myanmar are really very entrepreneurial. So
That's interesting.
hopefully that takes off.
I come from Jamaica, and this idea about everybody moving away from agriculture actually something I've been working on. I find it quite problematic, to be quite frank, because we must eat.
Yeah.
And there are certain fruits that you really can't pick with a big machine. You know, it's hard to pick bananas with a big machine. It's hard to pick, you know, cocoa pods with a big machine. I mean, cocoa pods do require somebody to pick it. So this whole thing then revolves around possibly rethinking the value of women's work, whether it be in the fields in agriculture or in ICT. So as we look at this future of women, then as you think about yourself as a young person and looking at this idea of empowerment and ICT, what are your thoughts about ICT as a, let's say, the design of ICT and the way it's been used so far as being sort of a masculine approach? In other words, the use of ICT is not neutral. In other words, it's also gendered in terms of it's about competition, it's about promoting and self-promotion. Do you think as more women get into this space and get into building apps and get into you know, using it in novel ways, that we will see more, perhaps even, let's say, gaming, different types of games being designed that will help to help shift the paradigms we're looking for around the issues of, say, of sustainability, because most of the games are about war and death and destruction.
Yeah. No, and I think that there's actually being done by women who do design games and that sort of thing, to see, you know, what are games that are designed with more empathy, with more of a systems approach. You know, what are those games like, and how do those impact and affect people? So I think that, you know, there's a potential for women in joining those things to really change those fields and add a lot of value into them. And I think that, going to your point about women's labor being undervalued, I think that's definitely true. It's true in the US as well, when we look at how there's never enough nurses or childcare providers or teachers, and those are, you know, underpaid jobs that usually women do. But then we have all of this unemployment. So why aren't people, you know, doing all of these jobs that we need people to do? Because they're low-paid women's jobs, and men don't want to do those jobs. But then on the other hand, we do need people to do those jobs. They're really important to society. We need people to take care of children and old people, and we need people to, you know, be caregivers in every society. So I think that there's this conundrum where women's work is crucial, but it's deeply undervalued. The same with kind of agricultural work. And so how do we look at valuing that type of labor as well? So yes, allowing women to seek the ICT jobs and find that, because those are lucrative, and women should, you know, be able to get lucrative jobs, but also finding ways to value the jobs that women do have in whatever society they live in.
But do you find that the men in your, let's say, age cohort, have those same notions about women's work and men's work, or has that shifted at all?
I don't know that people, you know, think so in such a gendered manner, but they definitely look at what pays well, and things that we have traditionally defined as a society as women's work don't pay as well as things that we've decided are men's work. You know, a doctor will make more than a nurse, or you know, a a kindergarten teacher will not make as much money as a college professor and things like that. So I think that those notions are there. I don't think that they would necessarily say, oh, it's women's work, I don't want to do it. They would probably look and say, well, this doesn't pay that much. And I don't think that most people would go to the step of analyzing, well, it doesn't pay so much because it's traditionally reserved for women.
But do you think that people, I'm really curious about, because I'm wondering though if, let's say, people your age group are still, because I hear so much about, well, millennials want to have jobs with meaning and they want to serve, but uh, is that really so? Is it that we have a shift where there's some young men who might say, I really want to be a male nurse. I want to be in a hospital taking care of patients. I want to be a kindergarten teacher and not be like laughed out of school by their friends for having such an ambition? Or is it that they're still kind of hesitant about expressing that?
I can only speak for my own experience and what I've seen, and I haven't seen anyone
Yeah.
be hesitant for those things. I know male teachers and things like that, and they while what they were doing might have been unusual for a generation above, they don't see that as unusual now, and
Okay.
so
That's what I was
people,
trying to get to. So it's
yeah,
not
it's not
unusual,
seen as
right?
an odd thing that someone would laugh at. It's sort of like, oh, great, you've decided that you want to, teach young children. That's amazing.
So there's a sort of a, it may not be a trend, but you would say there's a sort of a drift, if you will, where that is not like considered an one eyebrow raise, like you know, anymore. If somebody in your cohort was to choose make that choice as a for gender, in the same way that no girl who wants to be an aeronautical engineer would go like, why am I be an engineer? Nobody would scoff at that now. So in that same way, masculinity is no longer threatened then by taking a caring job. That's what you're saying. It's not, or there's no longer that stigma. It's not masculine enough.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's still, it's still a patriarchy, and in any career in which the majority of people are women, there is some sort of um, mild level of perhaps penalty, and I would say that whether that's economic, it's mostly economic, and then there's some amount of continued stigma. I mean, there is something to be said for the fact that so many people who are laid off from the who work in factories. So from those sorts of jobs, it is hard to retrain men who have been working in kind of masculine jobs, making automobiles, for example, to then do more kind of caregiving types of jobs. Um,
So let's look then at where we are in
mhm.
2030, and you're young enough to certainly go to 2050 and still be in your, let's say, no, still be in your top game, so to speak. 2050, I'll be
Okay,
just
I
like,
would hope.
be on my rocking chair.
Yeah.
If I'm 2050, I would just in my rocking chair playing crickets or something. I'd be 92 years old. Um, but so I'm really curious because, as you know, the Millennium Project has been doing Workforce 2050 as one of its projects. Begin to explore that because there's this notion that um, unemployment is not going to be so much about gender in the future, but more about artificial intelligence versus human.
Mhm.
So, as you think about the future that you want, how do you see women and men working in that future, and women, let's say, owning power or not in that future, in that workplace of 2040, 2050?
I think I mean, it's about what we can do that intelligence can't do. So I think it depends on how developed the artificial intelligence is. But I think that there are lots of tasks that artificial intelligence probably won't be able to do by that time. And I think it's Daniel Pink who writes a lot about this. And so they're more creative tasks. things that involve empathy and caring, tasks that involve kind of the touch aspect. So a lot of teaching kind of tasks are more
Oh,
effective. So just like a lot of tasks that actually are jobs that women are already doing,
I know,
you know?
but guess what? There is a robot that's being tested now for teaching.
Yeah.
So this makes me very concerned because there is an app being tested now for haptic touch. I saw a kiss app being tested, so you can send a kiss and the person can feel it right from this app. That's being tested. We have the notion of software that can write its own software. And so the question that I am asking us, perhaps as women futurists in particular, to think about, do we as women futurists, especially someone like yourself working on sustainability issues, do we as women futurists have any special responsibility or to say start to point out the more caring aspects of of the kind of choices that companies are going to make or societies are going to make if they willingly say, okay, let's just all change all these taxes to self-driving drivers. Let's just all change all these cashiers to, automated machines. Do we as futurists, women futurists in particular, who are supposed to have empathy and see the world slightly differently, have a special responsibility to lift our voices and try to be heard in a more advocacy way as opposed to just kind of exploring and pointing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the changes. You know, if we are looking at big societal changes that would lay off lots of people, we have to look at what's going to happen to those people. And I'm not saying that those changes are bad. You know, I think that driverless cars, for example, could be really great for society in terms of, reducing traffic accidents and freeing up people's time and enabling people who are not able to drive to be very mobile. So there's good things that could come out of the technology. You know, it's not all bad. But I think if and when the technology impacts people, so if driverless cars are going to put, you know, um, thousands and thousands of truck drivers and taxi drivers out of business, what are we going to do with all of those people? Are we going to provide minimum basic income for them? Are we going to have some sort of job retraining? Like what exactly are they going to be doing? So I think as futurists, it's really about thinking two steps ahead and saying, great, we've created a technology that's doing this the KISS technology with the KISS app. That's great. Is it people in a way that could hurt them or take away their livelihoods or disempower them? If it is going to do that, what are we going to put in place to make sure that they're taken care of?
Well, that's certainly one question I've been asking, and so far nobody. Not of this particular conversation, but in my world, I work in international development, economic development. So
Mm-hmm.
this whole issue of choices and long-term decision making for governments and countries, etc. We're talking about investing billions in a technology or infrastructure or whatever, so if the infrastructure, let's say, of highways have to be retooled to accept self-driving cars, then what's going to happen is a good question. Nobody knows. So as we kind of meander to the end, would you say that you would consider yourself an optimist or pessimist or neutralist? That's a word I made up. Neutralist about the future and 2030 in particular. And I don't mean, I know we're not going to actually get to the goals, but we certainly want to be on our way to the goals by 2030. How do you feel about where we will be as a human family by that time? And if you had to give me a headline story about something that you feel could happen, what would that be?
Okay, so I'll start with the first thing. I think that I definitely think I'm an optimist. I think that despite the current backlash, kind of trends, especially amongst young people, point towards a desire to work towards a more positive future and an acceptance of kind of making do with less and working hard and being passionate about what you're working on, and believing in things like climate change and the SDGs. So just kind of a baseline acceptance of science and data.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all good things. Demographic trends point to the fact that by 2050, white people will no longer be in the majority in the U.S. So the U.S. will be more ethnically diverse, and I think other countries as well. So there's a push towards greater diversity, and with greater diversity, I think there's of diversity, because then that becomes the new normal. You're used to seeing different people walking down the street and hearing different opinions. So that gives me hope as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess if I were to look to the what was the second part? The headline from the
Yes.
future.
Yes.
So headline regarding women, or just
Well,
anything
yes, regarding women.
regarding women in the future,
Yes.
in 2050.
Well, not so long, because maybe that's too far, but like 2030.
Okay.
That's only 13 years away. So you can really wrap your head around 20 years. That's only 13 years from now. So what will you be doing? What would you want to be doing? How old are you going to be? You know.
Oh gosh. So okay, 13 years from now. Um, all right. I will be in my late 40s, and I guess I can say that I'll have probably a couple kids by then, and hopefully still be working and living in New York. Um, I think that what I would like to see in those years is kind of a because I want to say like a greater kind of engagement with the world around us, but I think people are very engaged at this moment in time.
Yes.
It's almost overwhelming. But I think I would like to see more community-led action. So I think
Okay.
people are still right now struggling with technology and information, in that you're just deluged by it all the time. And I guess when I talk to my friends, this is what we talk about. So it's like, how do you manage even looking at Facebook? There's so much information. So balancing the access to kind of all the information of the world at your fingertips, with taking action in your community where you are, right here and now.
So perhaps the headline would be something like "Woman in Central City, quote unquote, New York, Toronto, wherever, take action in their community to reduce hunger or something
Right.
by
Yeah.
XYZ."
SDGs achieved by grassroots action in different locations worldwide.
No, no, that's really what has to happen. It has to be moved from global to local to personal. And
Yeah.
one of my passions is similar to yours, in a sense that I really feel as if, on my one side of my brain I'm an engineer, the other side of my brain I'm a storyteller and a playwright, and I really feel as if to say we have to tell a new story of who we are in
Hmm.
that time, in order for us to become who we are going to be. And it's not enough for the UN SDGs to have just this statistics, because statistics don't really move people and they don't mean anything to people. I worked in this space for years, and I was like, what does half poverty mean? What does it mean for Jamaica? What does it mean for
Right.
Washington, D.C.? So if we can change that language to make sure every child at basic school, in elementary school or kindergarten, has a hot meal with sufficient protein, then that means something, and you can actually do that. So I hear you. I think that's a interesting view that you have put on the table. I'm really interested in your idea that um, perhaps for your generation it is more about, perhaps, I think, I'm just to wrap up, that you said it's more about still grappling with the issue of looking for jobs, not so much but it's a masculine or feminine job, but more about the pay. Am I correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that there is this shift or drift towards more acceptance of non-stereotypical jobs for men.
Yes, and diversity and new types of jobs and new types of working. So freelancing, consulting, kind of the gig economy,
Yeah.
people are more open to those sorts of things. And the traditional model of I'm going to work in one company for 20, 30 years is no longer a reality. You know, it's not that people don't want it, it just doesn't exist. So I think that there's this move past that. And it's looking at new ways of living and working. And I think work-life balance is really important. And young people are realizing that early on that they would rather travel and spend time with their friends than, work themselves to the bone. But if possible, it's better to make less money and have less stuff, but have more time. That's those things are valuable, and that doing things like connecting with nature is valuable. So I think that there's kind of a shift in people looking at their values a lot more, which is a good thing.
Yes.
And that's positive. And yes, I agree with you. I think that to achieve these big goals, we have to think about that. And, we have to think about what our personal issues and how to implement them, and how, right now, I actually have a baby due in June. So I have one daughter already and another one due soon. So childcare is like constantly on my mind.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh gosh, is the administration gonna provide childcare subsidies that I would love to see in 2030, free or very affordable childcare available to all parents. That's crucial for parents to be then economically engaged in society. Otherwise, it's really difficult, and people really struggle with that. So, that's something that I see is really an important issue. But, it's kind of what are those issues that are affecting you, and then what can you do about them, and then acting. So I think Futures has this great potential. And it's great to talk to you, because Futures and Foresight have this great potential to take people to another place, to a vision of what they want to see, and then help empower them to get there.
Yes.
To say that, okay, this is what we want. If I want to live in this world in which there's easily accessible, affordable childcare available for everyone, what do I have to do now to make sure that's reality?
That's a very good place to start, because indeed the children are our future. I want to just say thank you so much, ALISHA BHAGAT, for spending some time with me, and for sharing your hopes for the future, especially your two children who will be very much young and upcoming in the year 2050.
Yeah.
And certainly helping to create a better world for them to live in. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners?
No, just create the future you want to live in. That's what I would say.
Create the future we want to live in. So that's it, folks. Thank you so much for listening to another edition of Future Sense Now, the online e-zine of the Futures Forum, where we strive to bring you the diverse voices of those who are doing the work that shapes our shared future. Today's guest was ALISHA BHAGAT. She is a Senior Sustainability Advisor at Forum for the Future in their offices in New York. Thank you so much for listening. And as I leave you to ponder your own landscape for the future, I invite you to remember that it is better to see yourselves as the parents of your future as opposed to being the offspring of your past. Safe journeys.
You have been listening to Future Sense Now with Dr. Claire Nelson, brought to you by the Futures Forum. For more, please visit www.thefuturesforum.org. Thank you for listening. Spread the word. Share the future.